Okay, welcome to Chapter 10. In Chapter 10, we're talking about social class. And for this particular chapter, we're pretty much sticking to social class in the United States. So let's look at a couple of concepts first. We have social inequality, and this is the condition in which members of our society have different amounts of wealth, prestige, and power. If we look at the way that the American social class system is designed, we can see that people have different amounts of wealth. We have the rich, we have the poor. We also have prestige that goes with it, which is, the amount of respect that comes with certain professions. Say doctors and scientists and researchers, are positions that command a lot of respect, and also power. What kind of power comes with your place in society. And we're talking about two types of power here, both political power and business power. Social stratification is the way that our social class system is structured. So it's a structured ranking of entire groups of people that actually perpetuates unequal economic rewards and power in society. So that means that the American class system can only work if we have social inequality built into our system, right? The rich could only be rich unless we have the poor, right? So we need to have poor people. We need to have a lower class in order for our capitalist American system to work. Social stratification is very important because it shapes our opportunities based on the position that we're in. Right? This should be nothing new. The more money you have, the more power you have in society, the more opportunities you have, and at the same time, vice versa. We know that certain groups of people stand higher in social rankings. They also control these scarce resources. They're able to wield power, and they also receive special treatment. And even though the American dream says that opportunity is open to everyone, this is the land and the free, that if you work hard enough and you want it bad enough, you can move up. In most cases, that's not true. Not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen. We do hear those success stories every once in a while where someone comes from extreme poverty and they rise up, but that's the exception, not the norm. In the United States, there's barriers that are built into the system, and individual effort alone does not determine your life's outcome, right? There's so much more that goes into it. And one of the things that we look at who controls resources, these things are passed down from generation to generation. So people are, they're born into wealth, they're born in certain positions, they inherit certain resources that continue to get passed down. So we have to understand the consequences of social class differences as we continue to build our sociological imagination, because where we are in the social class system influences why we think and how we act. So it's important to understand those things. And on top of it, we have to look at, if we go back to Chapter 5 and look at our ascribed statuses, a lot of our ascribed statuses, whether it be our gender, our race, ethnicity, our age, they also affect our place in the social class system. So we're going to look at a little bit of history real quick, and then we're going to continue on looking at the American social class system. So if you review in your book, there's a couple different types of stratification systems. We have slavery, we have the caste system, which is religiously dictated, usually associated with India, and we have the estate system, and we're talking medieval Europe here. The slavery, the caste, and the estate system are closed systems, which means that you were born into a certain social position, and there's no real ability to move in or out. If you were a slave, if you were owned by somebody else, you can't work hard enough to overcome those obstacles. The caste system is a very rigid system that, as India modernizes, is becoming less rigid, but still it's a fixed system. We look at the traditional caste system. And the estate system, looking at whether you're a landowner or whether you're whether you work on the land, whether you're a peasant. The United States, however, is an open system. So this is a social ranking based primarily on economic position, on money, in which our achieved characteristics, go back to Chapter 5 again, can influence social mobility. So even though it's rare for someone to move from all the way to the bottom to all the way to the top, in the class system, we do have the ability to move up or down within our social class system. And our ability to move up or down is called social mobility. And this is the degree to which people can change the social class that we are born into. there's a couple of things that influence our ability to move up or down in the social class system. Again, we go back to those described statuses. You know, race, gender, ethnicity, age. All these things do play a part in social mobility, and we have different types of social mobility. And the first type is horizontal mobility. And this is where you're moving from one social position to another, which is generally within the same rank. So let's say if you are a teacher and you decide after, you know, how many years you don't want to do teaching anymore, and maybe you go into nursing. So you are moving from one career to the other, but it's generally along the same lines. You know, if you are a bus driver and you decide to, you know, become a UPS driver, or if you are a doctor, you decide to become a lawyer. So horizontal mobility, you're just, you know, you're moving straight across. Whereas vertical mobility is you're moving up or down, because you can move back down within our social class system, right? So you're a nurse and you go to medical school and you become a doctor. That would be upward social mobility. You're a janitor, you go to law school and you become a lawyer. You can also move down, and we saw a lot of downward vertical mobility, especially when the recession hit in 2008. You know, people who worked on Wall Street, who had jobs in finance, and then finally found themselves out of a job and, you know, working at Starbucks or Target, wherever they could get some money to come in. So like I said before, even though it's the American dream to be able to really fly up this system, in reality, we tend to end up pretty close to where we started. Right? Most people either, you know, they're born middle class and they end middle class, or maybe they go from, you know, working class to middle class, or middle class to upper middle class, but we don't see this rapid movement on a regular basis in the United States. There's also two other types of social mobility. It's inter and intra-generational. So intergenerational is where change happens in the children relative to their parents, right? So maybe you know, your parents are, you know, one of your parents was a plumber and the child becomes a doctor. That would be intergenerational. Or maybe, you know, the parents are doctors and the child becomes a plumber. It could work either way. So this is where the, you know, the child is actually changing their social class as opposed to their parents. Where intragenerational is where you are changing social position within a person's adult life. So intragenerational is very similar to vertical social mobility. They're very closely related. And education is a significant factor here. Education really has a large impact on whether you're able to achieve inter or intra social mobility. So let's look at some material, social, and cultural resources. And this is important because this is what you're asked to do in your weekly assignment. So one of the things that also makes up where we are in the social class system is the resources that we have access to. And there's three different types of resources. We have material resources, social resources, and cultural resources. So our material resources are our money. Right? Economic resources that we own or control, and this includes our money, but it also includes our property, and it also includes our land. So how much money you have coming in, what do you own, what do you have, what do you possess, have you inherited, regardless. These are your material resources. Where social resources is the prestige that's based on the positions that we occupy and who we know. Right? So it's both the prestige that we have and the connections that we have that are based on the social networks that we are a part of. So you know that old adage, it's not, you know, what we know, it's who we know. That's where your social resources come in. And if you think back, and one of the things that you're asked to do in your Chapter 10 assignment is to think of, you know, how have your social resources affected where you are right now in your schooling or in your careers or in your life. You know, I just know personally, when I got my first job out of graduate school, I had a master's degree in sociology, which really does not qualify you to do much. And so I had a friend who, her brother was working at a prison halfway house in Camden, New Jersey, and she had said to me, you know, my brother's always looking for case managers. He's always looking for case managers. And so that's how I ended up getting my first job out of graduate school. Not that I wasn't qualified. You know, I had a master's degree. I had a background in addictions because I ended up taking on the addictions caseload, and I had taken counseling and addiction courses in graduate school. But all of that meant nothing unless I found someone who'd be able to give me a job. So I ended up, working with him, and then this put me on the path to where I am today. So a lot of times, it's about social resources, and as we continue through our career, we continue to build those networks and draw on those connections to kind of further go through it. So any type of connections that you have that have influenced where you are, in your professional life, or where you want to, what pool of resources can you draw on as you seek your careers. And then your cultural resources are our taste, our language, and our way of looking at the world. This cultural resources is pretty much Pierre Bourdieu's concept of capital cultural, cultural capital that's in your textbook. And this is, our knowledge of our knowledge of things, what we know based on the social class that we're on, the language that we use, and not so much whether it's English or Spanish or French or something like that, but even just the correct syntax and the correct wording of our language is very important when we look at how it influences how people see our social class. And just what can you draw on? What are the things that you like that's similar to other people in your social class? What are the things that you know that are similar to other people in your social class? And this influences the way that we look at the world. So to really understand cultural resources, read that part about Pierre Bourdieu and cultural capital. So when we look at material, social resources, and cultural resources together, it kind of helps us make more sense and figure out, where we are, how we got here, and and building that sociological imagination. So the next step in this assignment is to take a quiz to kind of see how privileged you are in the United States, how privileged you are personally based on a series of questions. And then it asks you to kind of look at, how your material, social, and cultural resources have affected where you are today. One little caveat, the quiz is from BuzzFeed. I understand it's from BuzzFeed. Keep that in mind as you go through it. It's just, I think, it's just like a friendlier, more creative quiz to kind of to get your mind going, to get these wheels going, as opposed to something very formal and very boring. I chose BuzzFeed for a reason, so just keep that in mind as you go through it. Oh, last thing I forgot, life chances. So life chances are opportunities that we have to provide ourselves with material goods, positive living conditions, and favorable life experiences. And what you see here, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so life chances are, based on the social position that we're in, how does this affect our ability to provide ourselves with, economic resources and material goods. How does our social class position affect our living conditions, our health, where we live, all of these things. And so our life chances are reflected in our housing and our health care, what kind of rewards we have, how likely we are to suffer from diseases or be victimized. These are all important things when we look at how our social class position affects so much in our lives.